Another version of Bills Take Two. I'm Jonathan Acosta, joined here by our WGRZ Bills insider Vic Carucci. This, our first off-season edition of Bills Take Two, with the Bills season ending this past Sunday to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And Vic, before we take a look at this upcoming offseason, first let's put a bow on the season that was for the Buffalo Bills. A season of a lot of ups and downs, but one that does eventually end in a fashion similar to a lot of past seasons. 3 of the past 4 they've lost to the Chiefs to end their season. And from your perspective, why are we sitting here talking today about the Bills looking ahead to 2024 now, as opposed to them getting ready for an AFC Championship game?
I've rewatched that divisional playoff loss to the Chiefs now 3 times, and just each time looking for more detail and more of the analysis that can tell us, okay, where does this team need to go? Not to put too much emphasis on one game, but what that game told me is that the Bills were good enough to get there, good enough to be in the thick of it, along with Chiefs, Ravens, all the teams that had basically you thought about being in the hunt for most of the season, and good enough to get there, but not good enough to finish the job. And what I mean by that is the Chiefs made not only just a few more plays, but they have some better players, period. And their quarterback played better, as well as Josh Allen played. Patrick Mahomes played one of his great games because he especially had to on the road. That was one thing. The coaching was better from the Chiefs' standpoint. And again, it wasn't a situation where the Chiefs dominated in any singular area, but they did enough things right. And from a coaching standpoint, schematically, just found those weaknesses they could exploit. And their offensive line play was exceptionally good. In fact, with each viewing, I saw more ways where their offensive line were able to dictate the game, and especially late. And you sort of got the feeling that everything the Chiefs did in the early going set the stage for them when they really needed it at crunch time. And that is when the game was determined, right? You had the Chiefs able to not only make plays, but I think wear down, pound down the Bills defense near the end.
And Vic, I think a lot of what you said is stuff that we've heard before. The Bills being able to be in there with the Chiefs, just not being able to make the plays, just not being able to get over that hump. 3 of the past 4 years have ended with the loss to the Chiefs. 3 straight years with the loss in the divisional round. When you look at the McDermott, Josh Allen era, another season where they haven't been able to reach the Super Bowl, just what are your overall thoughts on what they've been able to accomplish and what they haven't been able to get to yet?
I think the definition of teams that get to the Super Bowl, that go the distance, that win it all, is the word is great. And I don't think that word applies to the Bills in enough ways. I think very good. I think sometimes superb. But great is playing at a consistently high level for most of the season. Now, you could say the Chiefs certainly didn't do that, but they found their groove at the right time. They adjusted to what they were at the right time. From the Bills' standpoint, they had to, A, save their season when it was going off the rails. And obviously a big adjustment came with a coaching change at midseason. When we look at that, and as well as it worked out with Joe Brady as offensive coordinator, that is not a formula for success. You don't look at a championship level team and say before the season, oh yeah, they'll make a coordinator change along the way. Again, it worked out, but that was an upset that it worked out. And from a competitive standpoint, I think the Bills, again, played well enough to get there. I also think the rest of the AFC, they were fortunate, but the rest of their competition came back to them as they were winning games. And so be it. Your schedule is your schedule, and they pulled off the wins they needed to win that 4th consecutive division title. I do think it created a bit of a false sense, perhaps within the team, that they were better than they really were. They were in the hunt, and the final score of that divisional game shouldn't suggest that they didn't belong there, that they shouldn't have been one step away from a conference championship. But to go 3 years in a row and not play for the conference title, it really puts you in a different category. Obviously, having Josh Allen gives them that chance all the time. Sean McDermott's coaching record is going to reflect well, and he made a point of listing all the credentials of the success that has been accomplished since he became head coach, and that's fine. But that is regular season success. That is different than a team that has the goods to go the whole way. And when you go back on it, you can say, were they built at one point to be that? Did they have those ingredients in place? When you think of the Bills at their best in the course of the last few seasons, it was really the Allen-Diggs combination that provided most of that foundation and then sort of everything else. When you look at the Chiefs, for the most part, it has been Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, or Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, foundationally, and then sort of everything else. And this year, you had a Chiefs defense step up in ways it had not stepped up before. So that was a plus. The Bills defense, I thought, played incredibly well despite all the injuries they had, and credit to Sean McDermott's coaching. But I think they had to try too hard just to stay competitive.
Vic, I'm going to make this next question very simple, because the Bills, it's not like they haven't had regular season against the Chiefs. They have. They've won their past 3 regular season matchups against Kansas City. In the playoffs, it's been a different story. Do the Bills have a Chiefs problem in the playoffs?
I think they have a superior competition problem, because when they have faced the Chiefs in the postseason, the Chiefs have been the better team by and large. We could talk about 13 seconds. We can talk about finding a way to lose there. But the Chiefs needed to do one more thing at the end of regulation, and they did, and then one more thing in overtime to win that divisional game. They soundly beat the Bills for the AFC Championship before that. And then you saw the Bills get beaten by Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals at home. And then the conclusion was, well, that was because of the Damar Hamlin situation and a real wonky season off the, they went off the rails as a team psychologically for a lot of reasons. Well, maybe some of that was true, but I think some of that also became a convenient excuse. And when we looked at if you're really looking hard at the 2023 season and how much struggle there was for a good portion of it, you began to think not only might they miss the playoffs, but would they be good enough to stand up to the better teams in the postseason? And they had their chance with the Chiefs. The Steeler game, I don't even consider that. That was, to me, like a postseason bye week. The Steelers, in the state that they were in, were not going to compete with the Bills. But you come up against the Chiefs another time, and you demanded to get them at home. I mean, that was your whole mantra. And to make a big point of it, we got them where we want them. We got them here. The Chiefs showed you that they can beat you in your place, too, when it comes to the postseason. So to me, that's a hard thing to just get past, to look at it and say, when they face the Chiefs, yeah, they can beat the Chiefs. Well, they can beat them in the regular season, but things ramp up in the postseason. And that's not just player performance, that's coaching as well.
A lot of things to take into account then when I ask you this, considering the ups and downs, how the season started, how it was in the middle, then how it ended. What's the grade you would give to this Buffalo Bills season, and maybe more specifically to the job that Sean McDermott did in this season specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a solid B+, actually, because they did overcome so much. Now, some people might be saying, well, is that really a harsh grade? Shouldn't they be getting an A because they won a division championship and won a postseason game and fell 3 points short in the other one? But I think giving them more than a B+ is too much based on the body of work. why they put themselves in the position they were in where they had to rally at the end. You think about it, this was the first season where they were playing for their postseason lives in the final game. In the previous years, they had things wrapped up with 2 or 3 weeks left. It's a different mindset, and it takes a different physical and mental toll when you are pushing so hard just to get into the postseason. So part of that could have factored into how this season went.
All right, let's look ahead at some of the biggest offseason questions for this team. And let's start at the 2 coordinator spots, because Joe Brady, the interim tag is off. Now he's interviewing for actual offensive coordinator positions. And then on the defensive side of the ball, is Sean McDermott going to call plays for a second straight year? Just when you take a look ahead at this offseason to come, how do you assess the 2 coordinator spots?
I think it would make perfect sense for the Bills to retain Joe Brady. It would be possibly more trouble if they brought in somebody else, more disruptive, to have someone come in with different ideas, a whole different offensive philosophy, and putting yet another new voice into Josh Allen's head. And there already have been multiple voices in his head. To change again, I think could be a setback for him and for the offense, which is already going to undergo change. Granted, Joe Brady is still an inexperienced offensive coordinator, and it's hard to tell how good he's going to be because he just hasn't done it long enough. What he's done is promising. Josh Allen is endorsing him, so I think you've got to put some, put some faith into that. And then as far as Sean McDermott is concerned, it would be hard for me to think that he's going to look at this season and say, yeah, I really didn't do a good enough job as defensive coordinator. Someone else should do it. I think if there's any coaching area on this team where there should be a great feeling, it's that. It's what McDermott did with that defense. All those injuries. And he kept it together through scheming, through the detailed coaching he did during the week. I don't know how much of a burden it was for him from a CEO standpoint as the head coach to have that extra layer on top of it, but there was really no defensive strategic faltering that I could see that should be questioned. Now, he may look at the workload, and that could affect his thinking, but to see him go out and put it in the hands of someone else, because I don't think he was ever comfortable having someone else, as much respect as he had for Leslie Frazier, but having someone else run his defense when his roots as a coach are in that area, I don't think ever worked for him in a good way. So it would probably make sense when all is said and done that he stays as the defensive coordinator.
Does the risk of losing an assistant like Eric Washington or Bobby Babich play at all in your opinion on that? Does that make them think twice about maybe trying to keep one of them on as defensive coordinator so that they don't bolt for somewhere else?
It's possible they could look within the staff and promote a Bobby Babich to defensive coordinator or Eric Washington. They are both fine position coaches, and I think Bobby Babich is someone that the rest of the league is recognizing as a guy who is ready to elevate as a coach. I've known Bobby since his time as an assistant with the Cleveland Browns, and so impressive watching him work there. And it was just no surprise to me to see him do, such a great job once he joined the Bills. And his career, his body of work has been strong. I think Eric Washington has tremendous respect for the players that he has coached, and it gives great support to Sean McDermott, as does Babich and the other defensive coaches. But no one would stand in their way. Sean isn't going to stand in their way if they get an opportunity to go elsewhere. And I don't think Sean can worry about that as the reason he would keep one of them, to promote them to that defensive coordinator role, when again he's had the taste of doing both as a head coach. And I don't think that's going to, the idea of retaining one of those guys that way is going to carry more weight than his desire to keep running the defense.
All right, let's go from the coaching staff now to the roster. The Bills are in a tight salary cap crunch for this upcoming offseason. Brandon Beane, just a few comments he made in his end-of-season press conference, saying things like the Bills are going to have to shop at the same stores they did last year, not the big fancy ones like the ones in New York City, referring specifically to the defensive line, that every dollar they spend, they have to spend wisely. Just when you hear comments like that, and you know the Bills are in a situation where they're north of $50 million over the cap for this offseason, just how much of a crunch is that? How tight is that? Are the Bills going to be able to make enough moves to kind of put themselves in a position to be competitive, maybe find themselves playing against the Chiefs again next postseason? Because when you hear the word $50 million, that's a lot of money.
Without knowing exactly how much the cap is going to increase, it's hard to totally project that, but you get the sense from Brandon Beane that he knows it will still be tight. And that they're going to face very difficult challenges to retain players or sign players. And I think with more than 20 free agents, projected free agents, a lot of people are going to exit this team. And I think you're going to see a lot of change, especially on the defensive side. I think you're going to see a team that's going to get younger in a hurry, that's going to put most of its reliance on second-year players, younger players that they have still on rookie contracts, and on drafted players. And when they have, I think, 10 picks, if they make all of them, they would hope maybe that as many as half of those guys have a significant contribution as starters or regulars. They might need more than that, really, to be successful. Look, it won't shock me if the Bills take a step back in 2024 as a team. I mean, when you're going to make that many changes and you're still trying to sort of live down the failures that you've had, that starts to prey on you. There is no way that this team cannot be thinking about its constant shortcomings in the postseason. Now, we can say, well, that's incentive. That's what gets them motivated. But a big part of me thinks that could also be a distracting element and pressure points, especially for Josh Allen, especially for the rest of the offense. What's Stephon Diggs' mindset or status going to be? Are we going to look at another offseason where so many questions swirled about just how much he wanted to be a part of this team? And sorry, those questions haven't gone away. And then, again, with coaching changes, with the overall cultural change that's going to happen when you've got a different roster, when you've got new people. Yeah, you'll have some core people in that locker room, but you will have so many young voices in there as well, different ideas. It could be the best thing to happen to them, but my sense is it will take some time to get that group to kind of ferment and become sort of one, become collective as a team that rises to a level. It's hard for the Bills. They can point to regular season success, but it's hard for the Bills to say that they've got a championship caliber team. Division championships don't really give you the license to say that.
A couple more questions and then we'll wrap this up. I want to ask you maybe what's the team's biggest need roster-wise, because there's three that really jump off the page when you take into account free agency and retirement. Micah Hyde made it clear that he's going to consider his future. Definitely seems like retirement is a strong possibility for him. On the defensive line, they have multiple free agents. And then at wide receiver, you have a potential need for wide receiver too if Gabe Davis doesn't re-sign with the Bills. Just out of those three, which one would you think is the biggest need that they may choose to address, either free agency or at the top of the draft?
I think they can address all of them in the draft. I think there's enough help available. Whatever order, depends upon how the draft itself falls. And is there any maneuvering they're going to do? Brandon Beane always likes to do that, Trader Beane, to address those areas. It's supposed to be a draft that's very strong at the receiver position. So it would be hard for me to not see them try to get a dynamic playmaker in the mix. I think right now, and I don't know if I completely agree with Brandon Beane that Stefon Diggs is the unquestioned number one guy who's going to be that guy that he was in those dominant years that he was giving this team before this season. He really disappeared for a large part of it. Maybe he can come back to that form, but he's got to show that first. And they do need, to look at that upper tier level of receiver. They need to look for safety help for sure. And they need to probably find somebody at the corner position. And Sean McDermott will always tell you that his philosophy is you build the defense back to front. That is exactly what he did when he got here in 2017 with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, and then trading down from the 10th pick that Kansas City used to draft Patrick Mahomes to go down and get Tre'Davious White near the bottom of the first round. So those are the thoughts that I have in terms of talent. And then defensive line, knowing how many of those players are on those shorter term deals that they had this year. Can they continue to sign some of those players to more short term deals? Maybe, but I do think they're going to probably need to pursue that as well. And as far as free agency is concerned, it's hard to see this team being any kind of a big time shopper at all because they still have to carry the burden of some big time shopping that they did, like Von Miller, for instance, and then kicking the can down the road on his contract, on Josh Allen's contract, on Stefon Diggs' contract.
All righty, Vic. That's it for now. Thank you for helping us first off, put a bow on this season that was for the Bills and taking an early look ahead to this offseason. We'll be in contact plenty more as we look ahead to free agency and the draft, two aspects of the offseason that I know Bills fans and fans around the league are always looking forward to. Vic, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, Jonathan.